Welcome to the Indie Horror Junkie podcast. Tonight, you will be joining Rotting Ricky and Asylum Amy as they play host to some of the true movers and shakers in the indie horror scene. So lock your doors, check under the bed, and get comfortable, because here we go.
And I'm Sylvia Saska, and we're the Saska Sisters. And this is Indie Horror Junkie! Indie Horror Junkie!
Indie Horror Junkie!
Indie Horror Junkie!
Indie Horror Junkie!
Indie Horror Junkie!
Indie Horror Junkie!
Indie Horror Junkie!
We're a panic attack!
Indie Horror Junkie!
Woo! Indie Horror Junkies!
Indie Horror Junkie! Indie Horror Junkie!
Hello, everybody, and welcome back. We missed the last couple of weeks due to the holidays, Christmas, and of course, New Year's, and I really hope that it was great for everybody. But I am so happy to be back and finally have the Indie Horror Junkie podcast back on the air. We have several great guests lined up here for the next couple of weeks, so we're going to be kicking things off tonight. But first and foremost, I definitely want to send a prayers out to California. I've got family in California, including my daughter, 2 grandbabies, lots of friends out there, and it has been unbelievable seeing some of the unbelievable and devastating photos and videos from out there. So our prayers and best wishes go out to everybody there in California, everybody in the affected area and beyond. And we hope that this gets resolved as quickly as possible. And once again, we send our thoughts and prayers out to everybody out there. So hopefully we'll be able to provide you a little bit of indie horror news and information tonight to kind of get us back on track and get everybody excited. We got a few events coming up. I've got my special guest backstage, but before we bring him on, let me go ahead and get you caught up with some of the things we have on our way. First off, we will be without Asylum Amy tonight. She is taking care of business at home, so I will be running the ship. I think I can handle it as long as I don't push the wrong buttons, but we'll figure it out as we go. All right, so let's get things caught up. First and foremost, got some things to show you. We have the latest issue that is currently out there right now, which is issue number 13. Here's the beautiful cover with Art the Clown, Terrifier 3. That is currently on the newsstands as we speak. You can get a copy of it at indiehorrorjunkie.com, of course. It's going to be also at some of our venues that we have, that including Nightmare Toys. It's going to be at Viper Video and also at Scarecrows. By the way, Scarecrows is actually heading over to Days of the Dead, Las Vegas. So they will be there, and they will have copies of the new issue, which will be coming out on the 13th. So just to show you the copy that we have right here, like I said, of the current issue, which is issue number 13, issue number 14 will be out on the 13th. Let's see, what else do we have here? Oh, yeah. We got this little thing called the Indie Horror Junkie Film Fest that we are extremely excited about. Last year, there was our first year there at the MegaCon Orlando convention, which is an unbelievable convention. I mean, it was me, Amy, some of the other junkies, and 250,000 of our closest friends. It is an absolutely immense event, and we were so excited to be there. We put our first stake in the ground last year. Things went really, really well. Met a lot of great Indie Horror Junkie fans, created some new ones, and we had an absolute ball. This year is going to be even bigger. They moved us into a bigger room with a lot more seats because we were pretty much at capacity or over several different times last year. So they moved us into a much bigger room. We've got a full slate of films that are going to be there, and we are really excited about it. And on top of that, we've got some really cool premieres that we're going to be premiering. On Friday, let me show you this one. We have Mutilator 2, which is the sequel to the classic 1984 Mutilator, the Mutilator film. And we're going to have a panel following the film that's going to include Buddy Cooper, who is the writer and director of both Mutilator 1 and 2, Ruthie Martinez, who was in 1 and 2. We also have some other guests there that are slated to come as well, including Bill Hitchcock, Carl Grasso, and Dan Grogan, that were all in Mutilator 1 and or 2. So that's going to be for Friday night. There's going to be the film, and then we're going to have a panel with a Q&A, autographs. They're going to have some merch they're going to have out there, so that's going to be a lot of fun. Then on Saturday, we've got a couple of premieres. One of them is this one. We've been waiting for a long time. We've been promoting them a lot in the magazine. This is a locally produced slasher film called The Inn that we are really, really excited about. Our own Asylum Amy is in the film and one of the producers as well. This movie is actually being completed as we speak, and will be premiering on Saturday afternoon. Following the film, we will also have a Q&A panel with cast and crew, and they'll be on board to shake hands, kiss babies, sign autographs, all that good stuff. And then Saturday night, we have the big one. Check this out. Screamboat. Screamboat is a brand new film. This is going to be the movie is actually going to have a theatrical run, but prior to having the theatrical run, it's playing over at Days of the Dead Las Vegas, and then it's coming to Orlando, and we'll be screening there at our MegaCon event, the Indie Horror Junkie Film Fest. We are so excited for this film. This is from the producers of Terrifier 2 and 3. We're going to have several of the producers, cast, crew, there for the special screening, and as well, they're going to have a panel as well following. This is just some of the faces of some of the guests that we're going to have there. We're also planning a few surprises that we cannot reveal to as of yet. This is going to be, like I said, a very special fan screening. So not only are we going to have cast crew there for this panel, but they're also telling me they're going to bring some surprises with them, like they're going to bring some of the puppets used in the film and all kinds of really cool stuff that I'm very excited about. So that's going to be Saturday night. We're also going to have the world premiere of our own Indie Horror Junkie Nightmare Collection Volume 3 that's currently being edited right now. That'll be premiering there as well, which will also include our short film, The Turning, which we're very excited about. We had a great shoot, and we're really excited to show you what we've got there. So let me show you what we've got going on here. Here's the schedule. It's all broken down. There's Friday's complete schedule. These will be printed up and sitting outside of the auditorium so everybody can see exactly what's going on. That's for Friday. There's our Saturday schedule, showing you all the times and everything else. And then we also have our Sunday schedule. So we'll be there Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, which is February 7th, 8th, and 9th. Now, prior to that, we have something else that I want to show you real quick. The Junkies, meaning me and Amy, will be at a place called Tampa Bay Screams. It's an annual event here in Florida, in the Tampa Bay area. Let me show you this, what we got going on. Look at that. All these amazing stars and people. And down in the right-hand corner, Amy and I, we're going to have some great people out there. We're going to have Krista Grotti, who's I'm a huge fan of. I've worked with her for many years. April Hunter, Denise Duff from Subspecies. So many great stars. Just have a look at that. That's going to be, Sunday, January 19th. So Sunday, January 19th is going to be at a place called the OCC Roadhouse and Museum. We'll be out there from probably about, I think it's noon until 6 p.m. We'll have our tables set up. You can buy magazines, T-shirts. We're even going to have, let me show you what we're going to have there, because all this stuff is just coming out this week. We're playing catch-up. This is all amazing stuff. Remember this movie here, The Clock, that we shot? So excited. It's been on streaming services for about a month now. Now we're going to actually have it on Blu-ray. I'm getting an allotment of Blu-rays that I will have in my sweaty little palms by the 14th. And I will be bringing them with me to OCC, and I will be bringing them with me to MegaCon as well. On the Blu-ray, it's got not only the movie in high def, but we're going to have special audio commentary from myself and our DP Salozeus. And we have a special little featurette on there called Hickory Dickory Doom, which is basically the entire audio drama from back in the 70s that this movie was based in. I actually listened to this radio drama back when I was like a teenager, and it affected me so much. And I thought about it, kept saying that, man, that would make a great movie. Well, boom, there it is. And it's going to be on Blu-ray, and you're going to be able to have it in your hands. So excited about that. All right, now I don't want to wait too much longer before I introduce my special guest, but I did promise everybody when we got done with our last episode that we were going to have some special announcements. Now, we've made all the special announcements except one that I said we were going to have today, and this is the one that I'm going to make right now. In the Indie Horror Junkie Film Fest that we had last year, we started a trend where we started with our Lifetime Achievement Award. We presented it to Tom Savini, world-renowned special makeup effects artist, sent him a trophy. We showed his acceptance speech at the event and everything. Well, we're coming around again. So we have another Lifetime Achievement Award that we have to give away. So we thought long and hard about it and asked all the junkies, and we decided that there's one person that deserves it above all else. And that person is Joe Castro. Joe Castro is an FX master. He has been in so many movies. He has done the special effects in so many amazing movies, including doing the effects in The Mutilator 2, which will be screening at this event. So Joe Castro is going to be our Lifetime Achievement Award winner. He is going to win a trophy. And to make it even better, he's not going to get the trophy sent to him at his house. I just got word today that Joe Castro is actually flying in and will be a part of the event. So he will be there. He will accept it in person. He will meet and greet, kiss babies, shake palms, sign autographs, all that good stuff. So to announce him in full real quick, I put together this little minute-long little clip so you can get a little feel for what he brings to the table. And right after that, we're going to start talking about our guest and bring him on. So here it is, Joe Castro, our Lifetime Achievement Award winner.
Producer and special effects artist whose career began at the remarkable age of 15. After being hired to create special effects makeup for a PBS affiliate, Joe's talent was soon recognized on a national scale when he won the 1985 Special Effects Makeup Contest in Monsterland magazine. In 1989, he moved to Los Angeles to pursue his dreams and has since become a trailblazer in the horror genre. In 1993, Joe directed his first feature film, Ceremony, an apocalyptic horror shot on 35mm Panavision that earned a Silver Award at the World Fest Charleston Film Festival. He continued to make waves in the industry with cult classics like Legend of the Chupacabra shot on his family ranch and Terror Toons, a wildly successful series that now boasts 4 sequels. In 2011, Joe made history with The Summer of Massacre, which earned him a Guinness World Record for highest body count in a slasher film with an unprecedented 155 kills. Over his illustrious career, Joe has received more than 46 awards for his work in producing, directing, and special effects. As a creative force behind 16 feature films alongside his partner Steven Escobar, Joe continues to inspire with his unique vision. His recent contributions to films like Clown Motel 2 and 3, Mutilator 2, and The Beast Comes at Midnight cement his legacy as one of horror's most inventive minds.
I am so excited to present this award to Joe. I have known Joe for so many years. I've met him a couple of times at a couple of different events. We've chatted endlessly on the phone. He's just a great guy and one of the best effects artists I've ever seen. So we are very excited to have him as our Lifetime Achievement Award winner, and you will get to meet him in the flesh at the Indie Horror Junkie Film Fest in MegaCon Orlando. So without further ado, let me go ahead and introduce you to our upcoming guest here. His name is Lou Russo. I got to meet him later at the end of last year. He's a comic book artist, does some amazing work that lives here in the Tampa Bay area. His the book that I first got introduced to him to is right here, which is Valentina von Frankenstein. He gave me a copy. It's the Horror Shorts Part 1, which is the one to the left there. And I just received a copy in the mail today of issue number 2. He does such amazing work. So let me go ahead and show you a little bit of what he brings to the table here before we go ahead and bring him on for you. This is just some of his artwork from some of his magazines, and you can get a feel for that. I mean, look at that. Look at all that. Elvira, of course, takes the cake right there. Of course, I was always a fan favorite of mine. But that just shows you some of his artwork from the magazines right here. I would highly recommend picking up some of these magazines. He's going to tell you all about them. So let me go ahead without further ado. Let me bring him on, Lou Russo. Hey, there he is. How's it going, Lou?
Going good. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Well, first off, we're going to have your website right there, mcbookpublishing.com. Highly recommend everybody write that down, jot it down, go to it, friend him, follow him, all that good stuff.
Get it tattooed on a portion of your body.
There you go. Just don't tell us what portion that is. So how was the holidays for you, sir?
It was good. It was good. Yep. Quiet, you know?
Quiet? Really?
Quiet. Tried to stay under the radar. Tried to stay out of trouble.
Good luck. Good luck with that one. Yeah. All right. So tell us a little bit about how you got started in this field and what basically was your driving force to want to become a comic book artist, especially in the horror genre.
Well, I do this part-time, so I'm not a full-time comic book artist, but how far back do you want me to go?
I guess what your inspiration was, what first got you into art, and especially what drew you to drawing horror art.
Well, I was into art ever since I was a kid. And as a kid, into comic books and, of course, a lot of the horror comic books. I've got several here to show you, of course, the, Tales from the Crypt.
Oh.
All of these great ones. DC had some great comics, The Witching Hour and The Unexpected. So all of those things, as far as, my older brother collected comics. He was really into DC. So I got introduced from comics from him. And then also my dad had a box of comics. He had a complete run of the classic illustrated comics. So I got introduced to the classics that way. And, specifically, I really gravitated towards the horror ones. There were a few like Frankenstein, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, that type of stuff. So that, and then of course, being a monster kid, the title of monster kid is usually supposed to be for those that followed in the 50s and 60s. But I think any kid that grew up making their monster model kits and drawing monsters, watching Shock Theater and Creature Feature. I remember watching Dr. Paul Bearer in the afternoons, Saturday afternoons. So, I was into all of that and used to go to places like 7-Eleven, Little General, Ecker Drugs, and I would look for comic books that had, a lot of monsters. I was really into Spider-Man because I thought he had the best villains, and a lot of his villains looked like monsters.
Yep.
He had Morbius the vampire, he had the Man-Wolf, the Lizard, the Green Goblin. So picking up those comic books, and then also Famous Monsters magazine. This was something that I was very much into, and I think all of us monster kids enjoyed that. Of course, there was also, Fangoria. I was not as into this one as much, but I picked up a few of those.
That was mine. That was my favorite.
That was yours?
That was mine.
Reading those magazines and then trying to, draw those things that I saw was really the start of everything. But for me, I really gravitated towards, not just the Famous Monsters, but also the creepy.
Oh, yeah.
Eerie magazine. All of those titles were, beautiful covers.
They really were.
They were the color covers and then the black and white interiors. And then there were a bunch of other companies that came along and tried to do the same thing. The Skywald had Psycho and Scream and Nightmare. And then, Eerie Publisher, they could not publish a comic or magazine named Eerie, but they published a bunch of other horror titles. And their stuff was known for being exceptionally graphic. So when I started this journey to work on a comic book, I wanted it to look like those old magazines.
Right.
So that was the kind of the start for me, collecting all that stuff, growing up with all that stuff. And then, you fast forward several years to COVID. And when we were all at home with COVID, couldn't go anywhere. I did a lot of drawing and I started having luck selling some of those drawings on eBay. And so then I thought, well, what else can I do with this? And I started sending it to all of the different publishers. And 2 years later, the people at Scary Monsters magazine actually wanted to publish one of my drawings. And, that was a huge deal.
Yeah.
Been in, the college yearbook and the high school newspaper and, all of those things. Right. But this was a national and international publication, sold all over. This kind of filled the void of Famous Monsters when it folded in the 80s.
Right.
So, doing that was really the start of this comic journey for me. It's been this will be my 5th year kind of working on this.
Very cool. You got a friend here. Alan Bogle?
Oh, yeah. He also does a comic book. He does a Hondo comic book. Mm-hmm.
Oh, Hondo is in like the Western?
No, I think it means something else. We'll have to ask him
okay.
about it. I'm sorry, I might be even saying that wrong, but yes, he was somebody who actually, because when I started doing this artwork, I didn't know what to do with it, and he was actually the one that pointed me towards self-publishing, and I think that's really the way to go, and that's as independent as you can get. You put your own money up and you do your own thing, and
That's right.
no rules, so you don't have anybody kind of over you. You don't have to answer to any corporate sponsors or anybody like that. So
That's true. That's true. All right, so let's get into it then. Valentina von Frankenstein. Where did that concept come up? How did that whole thing start? Where is it at? And where do you want it to go?
okay, well, ideally, I'd want it to be a multi-million-dollar movie so that I can retire and live on an island somewhere, but have some action figures and some merchandising and all of that. But how that all started was, so I was doing these drawings for Scary Monsters magazine, and the individual that was put out this originally, they did about 100 issues, and it was kind of like a fanzine. And then another couple took it over. Vicky and Donna Smidaldi. I think I'm saying that right. I hope I'm saying that right. But they published it and they took it to a whole nother level. And it looks amazing. It is a great publication, a great magazine. So they had the rights to do that. And then they got the rights to do Castle of Frankenstein. So if you're not familiar with Castle of Frankenstein, that one was also around during the time of Famous Monsters. This one was kind of like Famous Monsters' big brother. It was, the articles were a little more adult. There was some illustrations, cartoons, and things that were a little more adult. And it even had a Slaymate of the Month instead of a Playmate of the Month.
Slaymate.
They got the rights to do Castle of Frankenstein, and then they contacted me and they said, well, look, would you like to do something for it? And I said, sure, what can I do? And they're like, well, how about like a comic strip? It's like, okay, well, how many pages do I have? They said, we'll give you 4 pages. It's like, okay, so I got to come up with something with 4 pages. So I dusted off a story that my older brother actually wrote in high school. So this is a story that's 30 years old, but we both grew up with the Twilight Zone, watching reruns of the Twilight Zone. So I wanted to do something like that.
Right.
And I needed a host. And, if you look at all the old magazines, the Tales from the Crypt, all of the witches tales and all those that we had here, they all have a horror host. That's real big, even in film and movies and stuff like that. So, you had the Old Witch and, all these guys. So I wanted a host. But when you look at female monsters, there's not a lot out there. You always wind up with either witches or vampires. You have Elvira, you have Vampira, you have Morticia Addams, Lily Munster. They all follow the same look.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, what other monsters are out there? Well, there really aren't any female werewolves, and that would probably be hard to do.
Yeah.
I wanted this person to be attractive, so I said, well, let me do something with the Bride of Frankenstein, and that's where Valentina came from. Originally, I was thinking, Victor Frankenstein, so she was going to be Victoria Frankenstein. Marvel Comics already has a Victoria Frankenstein, so I had to come up with another name. So I came up with Valentina, and the look of her, it was very much like like the movie Weird Science. If you were going to assemble a woman, or a man, I'm thinking, well, you would want the very best parts, right? So she was supposed to be this beautiful plus size model that was composed of the body parts of other supermodels. That's where Valentina came from. And she became my host for this story that my older brother actually did 30 years ago. So where do I see that going? Well, I've got issue 2 came out yesterday. I got the pre-orders out. I got everybody that helped me. They got a copy sent to them. So they should be receiving those soon. And I hope to do more issues.
Let's show this again right here. This is issue 1 on the left and issue 2 that you said just came out on the right, correct?
Yes.
Now it's a series of short stories in there, or is it like a continuing story?
It's each issue is 10 4-page short stories. So they're horror shorts. If I make them any longer, then I have to have horror longs, and I didn't want to do that.
Right.
Actually, I have my friend Dino Leto, who is my collaborator on some of the stories. He wrote 3 of the 10 in issue 1 and 3 of the 10 in issue 2. He's always wanting me to give him more pages and more panels. Typically, when you look at the Tales from the Crypt and you look at the Creepies and Eerie's, the pages were 6 to 8 pages. So mine are really short. I cram a lot into 4 pages.
Yeah. Now, I was reading a lot of the horror comics growing up, and I was really into the radio shows. There was a lot of really great old time radio shows. I mean, you can catch a lot of them still to this day on YouTube. But like I saw Witch's Tales there. There was a Witch's Tales. There was a Quiet Please. There was the CBS Radio Mystery Theater, and that's what I really got into because that was like the theater of the mind is what they called it. You could just lay back, turn it on, and just kind of imagine it. And Tom Savini, who's a good friend of mine, who's one of the greatest special effects artists of all time, he told me that you can scare people much more with what you can't see than what you can ever show them on screen because your imagination will run wild. So there are so many inspirational radio shows out there that have never been done on as far as movies go, and horror comics, like you're saying, that I've read, that I've looked at, that would be so cool. That's why I get tired of seeing Fast and the Furious Part 26 or all these different things like it. I would wish, that's kind of why I did The Clock. I did The Clock originally because that was based on one of those radio shows. And I would love for Hollywood to start digging back into some of that stuff and finding some of those great episodes and turning them into movies as opposed to all these sequels. But I understand the process. I mean, the bottom line is the sequels have a built-in fan base, and they cost so much money to make these days. So you want to use that built-in fan base to have a chance to get your money back. So there's a method behind the madness. But I think these indies really should look into some of that stuff when they're looking to inspire for their new movies. Look into some of those and get some of those unique and interesting new story ideas that were out before we were born.
I find it amazing that creative things get produced at all because there is so much talk about, the advertising and who's going to sponsor it and who's, it's all about making the money. And what you start with on paper becomes something completely different by the time it hits the screen. And, I know as an artist right now, I don't have any of those constraints, but I hear people that work for, Marvel or DC that, they can't use this character or they can't do that, or, so it changes what they're writing and what they're doing.
Well, that's the thing is that filmmaking and what you're doing with comic, doing the indie scene and doing it the indie way and creating your own and not having those entanglements, not having those people that you have to satisfy or anything like that. It just allows you to be creative. It allows you to bring to the table what it is that you envisioned. So if somebody's a fan of your work, they're going to see your work. I hear that so much with directors and that are working for the studios and stuff. That's why you see so many movies that years after they have their theatrical run, they'll come out with a DVD. That's the director's cut. This is the way I meant it to be seen. But when it goes to the studio, they've got these people that sometimes aren't even really fans of movies, I don't think. And they're breaking it up and chopping it up and adding this and changing that to where by the time it gets put out there to the public, it's not anything with this particular director. To me, it's like you hired this director because you enjoy his vision. Let him do his job. Let him put it out there. That's why his name is at the end of every credit, directed by. So let the people see their work. So that's one of the things that I really enjoy about the indie scene is that we don't have those creative constraints. Whatever we see, whether you like it or not, you're going to see it on screen because that's what we do.
And there's so much good stuff that comes out, and it's just, it blows your mind. All short format, long format, all of it. And I've always said, especially with comic books, Hollywood has started over the past few years. Comics have become a little more acceptable, but they're still not tapping the resource as much as they could. There are thousands upon thousands of stories out there. And, I've always said the comic book, that's your storyboard right there. You don't need to storyboard it. It's right there. So just, put it to film, put it to video,
That's why I love that old series. Remember the HBO series, Tales from the Crypt?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I've got all, I think 11, or I forget how many seasons there were, all of them. And I go back and revisit those because those were so good. And I had heard rumors that they're supposed to be, if they haven't already, redone that and brought it back. I'm not quite sure. So I'm really hoping for it because they were tapping into those old comics and turning those old comics into films, which is what they should be doing. There's so many great stories.
That's exactly what they did. And there's so much great stuff that's still out there. I'm trying to find, you know, Charlton put out a lot of great horror books. You could see the horror host there. Boris Karloff comics, you know?
Right.
This is all stuff that I loved. So, you know, what I've tried to do, and, you know, what my friend Dino Leto has described our book as, it's a combination of, you know, Tales from the Crypt meets Mad Magazine, you know, because we try to include a lot of humor. You know, I grew up with a lot of this. I used to love the cracked monster parties. Those were a lot of fun. So, and you know, even serious films that are supposed to be horrific still have humorous moments. You know, my favorite film is Jaws, and there's still moments in that are funny. But horror and comedy always have gone together. And you have movies that, like Young Frankenstein, that's a straight comedy, but then you have things like Zombieland that are, you know, now it's this subgenre. It's horror comedy, you know, and those are wonderful. So trying to mix all of those things, still have an old school feel, because we kept it black and white. I could very easily make it a color publication. We're not real heavy on the gore. Once again, we try to, like you say, you know, use the mind, the cerebral, you know, we leave it with, okay, this is, you know, up to your imagination.
Right.
And sometimes that's the most terrific.
Right. Like you were just mentioning about some of the horror comedies. I mean, to me, one of my all-time favorites is Shaun of the Dead. If you've ever seen that one.
Oh, yeah.
And I think the reason that a lot of those work is because they don't play it as a comedy. The zombies and everything, they're playing it straight. It's a horror movie. What happens is that there's comedic parts because of some of the characters and stuff that, you know, they do stupid or outlandish things or whatever it is. But essentially, it's played straight. I think that's what helps the comedy come out of situations like that.
Right. I was thinking the other day of, you know, Sharknado. Those movies are hilarious, but they're not treated as slapstick comedy. They're all acting like this is a real thing, you know?
Right.
But, I mean, so I enjoy that. I enjoy the mix of the humor and the horror, and that's what I hope people get out of the publication. With issue 2, I really tried to. This was as closer to what I wanted than the first issue, because what I did was I brought on a lot of other people through contacts, Instagram, Facebook. I bugged the hell out of all kinds of people. And, some of them, you know, the worst thing is when they don't answer at all, but some of them did answer and say, you know, look, we'll contribute. I said, look, I can't pay you anything. I'm not making any money. They always ask, you know, you're making any? No, the only person making money is the printer. Right. So, but they contributed some great work, and, you know, that collaborative effort, being able to bring other people on and put something together that was both, you know, I have a prose story in there that's very scary, but then I have another story in there that is about monsters dating, which is very funny, you know, and that mix. So I hope people, I mean, I understand times are tough, but if you plunk down your $13.99, I hope that you have a little enjoyment and a little escapism from, you know, the horrors of the rest of the world, you know, which is what the kids were always looking for. The kids, you know, we grew up and we could identify, we were outcasts. We were nerds. We were geeks. If you collected comics, you know, or watched horror movies. But I know growing up, I could identify more with the monster than I could with the mad scientist or the policeman or the villagers that were trying to kill him, you know?
Yeah.
And a lot of us monster kids, you know, you reach puberty, you get interested in girls, and you leave all that behind. But there's still some of us that, you know, it never left my system, you know?
Exactly, yeah. I still have some of my earliest memories of me being a kid. I remember me being a kid. I could not tell you how old I was because I had to be well under 10, sitting in a pool at the Disney Resort, and I was sick at that point, so I couldn't get in the water or enjoy myself. But my mom bought me a coloring book from the Famous Monsters coloring book. So I was sitting back there coloring the different monsters and something from a kid. That was our enjoyment. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have all the stuff that we have today. Back then, it was our imagination, going outside, magazines, and that's it. So I enjoyed that. But like what you mentioned with yours about your Valentina von Frankenstein, you've got different stories in there. Some are really serious and scary. Some of them are more a little, you know, comedic stuff like that. Do you remember the movie Heavy Metal?
Oh, yeah.
Same thing. They had the different comic parts. One of them with the zombies was really scary. And I remember scared the heck out of me when I was young. And then they had the comedic parts or whatever. That's what was such a great mixture. And it always worked in comics and in films as well.
Yeah, very much so. I loved all of that. I loved, things like Creep Show.
Yes.
There was a show that I binge watched just recently, Masters of Horror, that had a lot of, some were more serious than others. Some they actually were comic stories that they adapted. So, all of that to me is very interesting. And as an artist, it's more interesting to draw something different each time, I don't know how much, the people watching might know about comic art, but, everything is much bigger than the actual printed page. So like this is a page here. Try to get some of the glare out. So I work a little bit bigger than when it actually gets printed. And I like to put in a lot of detail and a lot of characters. But, by that fourth page, after looking at something for 30, 40 hours, I'm ready to draw something else,
Exactly. Now, you talked about a little bit here at the beginning, but like with this magazine here, the latest one you just put out, how much of that is done by you? Do you do all the artwork?
Well, no. This one I finally got other people on board to do some of the artwork for. So yes, that was made. I was able to get it out a little faster. The first issue, it was all me. I did all the artwork for all 10 stories. I did not write all 10 stories. Like I mentioned, I have a collaborator, Dino Leto, who we call him the unofficial coach of the magazine, or I call him like the huckster of the magazine, the face of the magazine. We did a story together where he's like the Stan Lee type, where and I'm more of the Jack Kirby or the Steve Ditko, and I'm doing all of the artwork and he's taking all the credit for it, and then he goes to Hollywood and he makes millions off of all of my work, So yeah, at the end, the surprise ending of that is that I take an axe to him, but so
we'll teach him.
He's the only one that actually writes a script and tells me, okay, this is this frame and this is what's in it and this is the dialogue and the panels and so forth. All the other stories come from suggestions that people make.
Oh, okay.
That's so if somebody makes a suggestion, I mentioned in issue 2, I was sitting in an Irish pub with my friend Jesse, and he tells me, what about the story where there's, the tooth fairy or creatures, and they're making things with teeth, and they're making weapons with teeth, and they're making body armor and all this stuff out of teeth. And I said, okay, well, that's interesting. So, are they true fairies? Are we going to do a magic thing? Is it another world? He's like, well, I don't know any of that. I'm giving you the crust of the sandwich. You have to fill in the rest. Okay. Right. So then I thought about it, and I came up with this idea that they were actually aliens from another planet, and they disguise themselves as the tooth fairy. They come to our planet, they take all the teeth, and they're planning this invasion. So, I had to come up with all of the rest of it, but the story itself was a suggestion from somebody.
Very cool. Very cool. Now, you were mentioning here about the script, because I work with another friend of mine who I think Austin Janowski.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he did a series called Zombies, We're Human Too, that he made a graphic novel of. I think it's coming out with, part 3 or volume 3 has just come out recently or something. And what he does is something similar to what you were talking about, where the premise is about a group of small kids that are running around this zombie apocalypse. They hold up in a hotel or an apartment somewhere, and there's a couple of smaller kids involved. So the smaller kids are really scared and out of their mind. So the bigger kids decide to play a game. They start talking about the zombies that are wandering around outside and what each of them must have done prior to becoming a zombie. So they're telling these stories, and as they tell these stories, he shows the entire stories. And what he does is he matches script writers with artists for each story. Somebody, I'll write the script, another artist will match with me, they'll go ahead and put my script to art and turn it in. But I'm a script writer. I've never written to like what you were talking about with this is what this frame is going to be and have and say and so yeah. I just write it as a script, and then I send it to the artist, and they go ahead and do the artwork and whatever frames need to be made, and they do it. I've written 2 stories, one for his volume 1 and one for volume 3, that I was really excited about, and they did a great job. And I worked with a couple of fantastic artists and some of the other artists. And that was probably one of the nice things about this, that you could look through that magazine And each artist had such a different way of drawing. Some of them were like almost, it's hard to explain, all bubbly and stuff like that, but it was just such a cool, catchy little thing. And others were like every little intricate little detail, like you were showing in yours, that they caught every little thing. It was just so amazing to see the different ways that people bring those stories to life.
Yeah, that's a great premise, and I love what he did with that comic book. I would love to be able to step back and just match artists with writers, so that it's not so much all of my artwork. But yeah, it's always interesting to see different interpretations. You know, Eerie and Creepy, the old Warren magazines, they used to do something like that, where they would take one cover and they would let, 5 different writers write about that cover. They give you just a painting. Here's the cover, and you come up with a story. And each one of them would come up with 5 different stories about the same cover. Or, they'd come up with one story, but illustrated 5 different ways. So, that type of stuff is really interesting. There's a lot of talented people out there. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of money going around to pay for all these talents,
Yeah, well, the worst part of it is the printing. Like you said, that's what it is that most people can't afford to print. I mean, we got lucky because we found a couple of good printers that give us great prices. So we're able to, because my magazine, Indie Horror Junkie, started out as a digital zine because we just couldn't afford to print it. And then we found some good printers. We got some sponsorships because people send us to put ads in the magazines. So basically, but we're not making any money for the most part off those magazines. It's basically just enough to get us to keep printing more and more and get the word out there. But the whole idea behind the magazine is because we're out here to get people like yourself and other filmmakers the exposure that we feel they deserve. There's so many talented people, like you just mentioned, out there, and they're not getting the run. You mentioned Fangoria magazine, one of my favorite magazines still to this day. Rue Morgue, Creepy, all those magazines have Famous Monsters, like you talked about. I still love those magazines to this day. And I didn't create Indie Horror Junkie to compete with them because they pretty much write about all the theatrical movies and the big budget movies and the studio movies and stuff like that, which is what I enjoy and why I want to read them. We're doing it about the indie. So I look at Indie Horror Junkie kind of like as the minor league system. My dream is to have somebody that we promote and do a big story about one of his upcoming films in my magazine, and then a year or two later, see him in Fangoria magazine talking about his studio film. That we got him when he started and you moved up, and that maybe we had one small little part of bringing attention to him that helped him get there, and that would make my decade, because that's what we're about. So. We really enjoy that. So now with you, with regards
to a love of what we're doing, it's about a love of the genre and a love of what we're doing, and that's. I mean, and I grew up. I love superheroes. I love sci-fi. I try to mix some of that in when I can. But I've just really enjoyed, doing the horror lately. It's been very versatile for me.
Who is your favorite monster? Because you said talk about being a monster kid. So you're talking about all the old school Universal monsters and like you said, growing up with Creature Feature. Who is your favorite overall movie monster?
When I was a kid, I was really into Lon Chaney Sr., the Man of 1,000 Faces. That's what I wanted to be. And I remember dressing up. There's still a picture of me somewhere dressing up as the Phantom of the Opera. And I took Scotch tape and I put it on my nose to get my nose, forward. But after that, then it was probably the Wolfman. That was another one of my favorites. These days, of course, it's, Frankenstein and the Bride of Frankenstein. I try to incorporate them into whatever I'm drawing. So I have such a limited time that when I sit down at the table, I'm not doing commissions and things for other people anymore. It's like, okay, I'm going to do this piece and I'm going to figure out how I can work this into the next issue. It's always about, because and you probably know this, you do number one, or you do one film or one commercial or whatever, and it's like, okay, that's great, but is that it? Am I a one-trick pony? Can I repeat the magic? And you get that drive. It's like a drug. It's like, okay, I got to do it again. So now it's like, okay, I did number 2, so it wasn't a fluke. The first one, in fact, number 2 has more pages than number 1, so there's even more content and more stuff in it. But now it's like, okay, so now I'm already thinking for number 3, the pictures you held up, the one here that we have here, this is already going to be the first story for number 3. And it was about, a friend of mine said, well, what about doing something with Hurricane Milton? So I said, well, okay, that's, we all went through Hurricane Milton. That sounds, when people suggest things, my mind is thinking about visuals, And right. Some people have suggested some really good stories, but it's like, what am I going to draw? It's like, I don't want to draw just people standing around talking. It's like I'm thinking of, okay, how am I to make this visually interesting? Because that's what's fun for me is the drawing.
Okay, I know you said the first issue of Valentina was all you, and the second issue you were able to bring in some other artists and writers and things like that or whatever. So give me an idea. What is the turnaround for a magazine? How long does it take? Obviously, it's going to be a completely different turnaround time for part 1 to part 2 because you had other people helping with part 2. But how long does it take you to put a magazine together and get it out there?
The very first one took me a solid year, doing it on the side between family, work, other commitments from one summer to the next. It was a solid year to get 10 stories drawn and then have it all put together. The people at Scary Monsters magazine, Vicky was a huge help in giving me tips, pointers, showing me how to do layout and design and a lot of things like that, editing all of my work. I mean, she, I couldn't have done it without her. So that was a solid year. And then after that one, I started working on the next one, and the next one just got finished. So that was probably from summer to December. I sent it off to the printer in December, and I just got it the other day. So that was another 6 months. So
cut your time in half.
Cut my time in half. So I got 2 done in a year, which is good. Castle of Frankenstein is printed twice a year, so I felt good about that. They do a wonderful job. This is the new Castle. They do a wonderful job with this. If you're looking for, if you're into horror, and they all mention some of these smaller films as well. So, not to take anything away from you, but people that are into those things, you can find all kinds of stuff. You mentioned Rue Morgue. I think there's Scream. There's what's the UK one? There's another one out there that's dark. What is it? Dark something or other. Dark. I think it's called The Dark Side. Maybe that's what it is. But anyways, there's a lot of great magazines out there, and they try to cover the whole thing: the toys, the movies, the TV, everything.
Hey, to me, the way I look at it, I don't look at competition. I look at the more spotlight on these people, the more opportunities they get, the more product I get to watch.
Exactly. We're all in it together to help one another. That's what I really wanted to do with the magazine, because there were some people that I'm like, and I'm going to show you a few here. It's like, this person's artwork is amazing. And it's like, well, who's going to see this? Nobody else is, unless you're on the internet, not all of us want to download or want a digital, some of us want a physical, printed copy of something.
Yeah.
And I see artwork all the time, and it's like, wow, this is just, I love this guy's stuff. I mean, some of the people in the magazine, they make my artwork look like stick figures, and that's I don't have a problem with that, just beautiful stuff. And then in addition to, all of the help from the artist, then I had help from other people. Valerie Perez, an actress out of California, she's been a big supporter of, being my Valentina. She shows up in a few other spots as well. I have, I call her the mysterious Miss Lee. She's played some of my characters. So, adding this other element to it. I've got an article here about, you would be interested in that. Indie film. This woman makes indie films in Scotland. So, but she talks about how she grew up with the Hammer films. Her dad used to watch Hammer films with her. Now for her to be an actress and a producer and director and all these doing these short horror films over in Scotland, and then I have, people that do cosplay. I have somebody that traveled to Salem, Massachusetts. So, we have all of these pictures here, a little brief history of Salem and the witch trials. And so it was really, such a collaborative effort. And I thank everybody for being a part of it, because, I'm just so proud of, what came out, and I'm looking forward to doing more of it.
Absolutely. Like I said, you're in it the same way I'm in it. It's not about to make money. I mean, as long as we don't lose a lot of money, then we're fine with it.
As long as you don't lose a lot.
Exactly. Yeah. We're going to lose some, of course, obviously. That's pretty much it. But to me, that's the price you pay for wanting to get your creativity out there. Because the way I look at it is movies and magazines and comics and this and that, they're going to outlive us long after we're gone. They're still going to be out there. They're still going to be in other people's hands and stuff. So that's our legacy right there. So let's make it worthwhile.
Exactly. That was my thinking. When I go, this is what I leave behind. 30 years from now, somebody might be going through a dusty long box of comics or magazines, and they might come across this, and they might wonder, whatever happened to that guy? He did some pretty good stuff, and
Yep.
Unfortunately, you can't get on with the big guys anymore. It's almost impossible these days to get on with like a Marvel or DC. So that's the route. Like Alan is self-publishing. A lot of his stuff is great. He's working with writers and artists and putting them together, and that's the way you have to go.
Yeah, but just like you said, a lot of people just would much rather have that physical copy in their hands. Like Howard here loves his physical copies. I feel the same way. It's nice to read stuff on the computer and this and that, but I much rather hold it in my hand, something that I can pass along to somebody or leave somewhere, whatever it is, for somebody else to get. So as long as we can make enough to do the printing, we're going to keep doing it.
Yep. And something else, I don't know if I mentioned, but all of my stuff is done by hand. That's the other thing is you notice a lot of artwork now is digital. It's all done on the computer. And, all of mine is paper, pencil, pen and ink, so I'm not really smart enough to use a computer. I just found out a few days ago what a podcast was. So I'm like,
Really?
podcast? What's that? So is that like the pod people? Is that from Invasion of the Body Snatchers?
The Body Snatchers, yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's going to happen. Somebody's going to have to buy me dinner first because I'm not doing that.
Well, here you are now. I like it. All right, so we're getting ready to close up here. So before we do that, obviously, we want to direct people to mcbookpublishing.com. What are they going to see on that site?
They're going to see samples of my work, and they're going to see how to purchase directly. They can click on the little shopping cart and order copies of issue 1 or 2 from me, as many as they want. And then there's also some other smiling people that are holding up the magazine that are, they say they read it. I think maybe they just looked at the pictures, but, they enjoyed it. And so that's what you're going to see.
Okay. I know you said you were working on part 3. Is that correct?
Yes. So over the break, you asked me what I was doing. It was drawing, strapped to the drawing table. I did the hurricane story. It was another 4 pages, and that will be the first story for the 3rd issue.
When do you think we'll get to see part 3?
6 months.
Okay. So you're going to have a group of writers and artists.
Sooner, if you know anybody that is looking to do some artwork for free.
I just might. I'd love to write for you too. So let me know.
That'd be awesome. I would love that.
Okay. Is there anything else other than Valentina that you're working on or that we can look for in the future?
Right now, that's all I'm working on right now. Right. You have a muse and you have a motivation and you just kind of go with that until you get tired of it.
All right. Now, question I have to ask you. Are all those boxes behind you filled with comics?
Yes.
Wow. That's a collection.
That is a collection. I probably shouldn't tell you how many boxes there are, but yeah, that is a collection.
Well, it's up higher than the couch, so
I can pan over briefly and show you some more, but yeah, it is higher than the couch.
I'll take your word for it. Now, you've been collecting these since you were a kid?
Since I was a kid. I still have many of the books that I bought, off of a spinner rack at Eckerd Drug Store and places like that. So I've always been very much, the type of person that when I had something, this was instilled in me from my dad because, he had a whole set of classic comics. When you have something, you take care of it, right. And it'll last forever. So I always took care of my things, and I have a lot of my, my original action figures and plastic models and you name it.
I tried to take care of things too, but unfortunately I had a sister, and whenever she'd get mad at me, she would tear up baseball cards and things like that. So that was her way of getting back. Thanks, Gene, just in case you ever watch this.
Yeah, I had a twin brother that broke a lot of my stuff, but some of it survived.
Absolutely. Was your dad into comics as well?
Just the classics. He
Okay.
just had that original run of the classic comics. And so that introduced me to, Moby Dick and the Three Musketeers and stuff like that. Every once in a while he would talk about, the Submariner and Captain America, but he didn't have any of those issues. So I think he just read them, but he didn't collect them. So, but that's what he was into. Yeah. And his whole thing was, he would read the classic comic and then turn it in as a book report. And the teacher thought he read the book, it's like,
oh yeah, like the Cliff Notes kind of thing.
Right. Nowadays you watch the movie, but back then that was his thing.
Right. Joe says, I still have all my classic comic books, not quite as many as you. Yeah, I've got a collection, probably one big long box. And then I have a separate box that I have for all my indie comics because I've worked with a couple of filmmakers that have made, I myself have authored probably 6 different comics for films and stuff that I've either done or want to do. I've worked with Austin. I wrote the stories for his Zombies Were Human Too, and he also did a prequel comic for my Web of Darkness movie as well, and Dawn of the Dead. So we did. I've got all those. So I've got my little short box that I've got of all my and that's where I've got your magazines in as well. So okay. I love it. I mean, to me, like I said, it's inspirational, and I grew up with that stuff. So I really can't thank you enough for being on the show and giving us a chance to see what you're doing and making sure that everybody goes to mcbookpublishing.com.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate this.
Absolutely. So like I was saying at the beginning, hang out for me for a minute or two. Let me just close things up, and then we'll chat a little bit, okay?
Will do.
Once again, Lou Russo, everybody, mcbookpublishing.com. Thank you for your time, and we'll talk to you in a few.
Great.
All right, everybody. That was Lou Russo. He lives here in the Tampa Bay area. I got the pleasure of meeting him over lunch one day. Got to read Valentina issue 1. Just got issue 2 in the mail today. He's a great artist. The stories are really cool. Like he said, a couple of them are more straightforward horror, but then the other ones are comedic, so it pretty much will handle all your tastes. So definitely check it out. Go to his website, give him a like, and look him up on Facebook as well. Next week, we have a very special guest coming on as well. We have a guy named Joe Lamb. If you haven't heard of him now, you will soon. He just did a movie called The Fetus, and this is going to have some big stars in it. Bill Moseley, Lorraine Lavera from the Terrifier series is in it as well. The movie's getting a lot of run right now. It's playing over at Days of the Dead, and we're going to be talking to him about that film and seeing all the good stuff that he's bringing to the table. So thank you very much for everybody coming out today and welcoming us back to 2025, our first show of 2025. We'll keep this up every week. Like I said, sorry about the 2-week break, but family things kicked in. Santa had to be delivered, and New Year's had to be delivered, and all that good stuff. So we took care of that business, and now we're back bringing you the horror. So thank you again for joining us. We'll be back on the air next Wednesday. Once again, as a last-second reminder, if you're in the Tampa Bay area, come out on January 19th to Tampa Bay Screams. It's going to be a great event with a lot of great guests. And then if you're in the Orlando area, if you're not, make sure you go to the Orlando area in February, which is the first weekend of February, the 7th, 8th, and 9th. We'll be there at MegaCon Orlando. We're in room S330C, and we're going to have a big spread there for you, wall-to-wall films for all 3 days, guests, panels, pictures, giveaways, all kinds of stuff. We're going to make your trip worthwhile. So definitely come out there and see us, and look us up on IndieHorrorJunkie.com, and we'll talk to you again next week on our podcast here, all right? So we'll see you next Wednesday.